Nigeria, of course, being one of the countries that attended the G20 Foreign Affairs meeting that was held here in Johannesburg. Nigeria is considered one of the key economies on the African continent.
Well, Nigeria is here on invitation of South Africa, that is currently chairing the presiding over the G20. And we are very grateful for being invited. Nigeria is becoming a regular invitee to the G20, and it is our hope that we will also, like South Africa, become a member of the G20.
The G20, a forum of the world's largest economies, has long been a stage for shaping global economic policies, addressing climate change, and fostering international cooperation. But as the world evolves, so too does the need for greater representation. Enter Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, with a population of over 200 million people. Nigeria is now making a bold push to join the G20, and it's looking to an unlikely ally for help: South Africa, the continent's only current G20 member. Why is Nigeria seeking South Africa's assistance? And what does this mean for Africa's voice on the global stage? Let's dive in. To understand Nigeria's ambition, we need to first look at the G20's significance. The G20 represents around 85% of global GDP, 75% of international trade, and 2/3 of the world's population. It's a platform where decisions are made that affect every corner of the globe. Yet, Africa, home to 1.4 billion people, has only one permanent seat at the table: South Africa. This underrepresentation has long been a point of contention, especially as Africa's economic and geopolitical influence grows. Nigeria's case for G20 membership is compelling. With a GDP of over $500 billion, it is the largest economy in Africa. It's also a major player in the global energy market, being one of the world's top oil producers. But Nigeria's ambitions go beyond economics. It wants a seat at the table to advocate for issues that matter to Africa: climate finance, debt relief, and sustainable development. However, joining the G20 isn't as simple as submitting an application. It requires the backing of existing members, and that's where South Africa comes in. South Africa, as the only African member of the G20, wields significant influence within the group. It has been a vocal advocate for African interests, pushing for reforms in global financial institutions and greater investment in the continent. But South Africa's position also comes with challenges. As a middle-income country, it often finds itself caught between the priorities of developed and developing nations. This balancing act has led some to question whether South Africa can effectively represent the entire continent. Nigeria's bid for membership could alleviate this pressure by giving Africa a second voice in the G20. Africa is the world's youngest and fastest growing continent. By 2050, it will be home to a quarter of the global population. This demographic shift presents both opportunities and challenges. On one hand, Africa has the potential to become a global economic powerhouse. On the other hand, it faces pressing issues like poverty, unemployment, and climate change. These challenges require global solutions, and Nigeria argues that it can't effectively contribute to these solutions without a seat at the G20 table. So, why is Nigeria seeking South Africa's help? The answer lies in the power of solidarity. Nigeria and South Africa are often seen as rivals, competing for influence on the continent. But in recent years, there has been a growing recognition that their interests are aligned. Both countries stand to benefit from a stronger African voice in global forums. By supporting Nigeria's bid, South Africa could strengthen its own position within the G20 while also advancing Africa's collective interests. Of course, Nigeria's path to G20 membership is not without obstacles. Critics point to the country's internal challenges, including corruption, insecurity, and economic instability. These issues have raised questions about Nigeria's readiness to take on a leadership role on the global stage. Similarly, South Africa faces its own set of challenges, from high unemployment to energy shortages. these domestic issues could limit both countries' ability to advocate effectively for Africa within the G20. Despite these challenges, Nigeria's bid has gained traction. At the 2025 G20 summit in South Africa, President Tinubu made a compelling case for Nigeria's inclusion. He argued that Africa's underrepresentation in global forums undermines the continent's ability to address its unique challenges. His message resonated with many leaders, particularly those from developing nations who have long called for a more inclusive G20. The G20 has historically been reluctant to expand its membership, fearing that a larger group could become unwieldy. But as the global economy becomes more multipolar, there is growing recognition that the G20 must evolve to remain relevant. Nigeria's bid is part of a broader push to reform global governance structures, making them more representative of the 21st century's realities. Nigeria's quest for G20 membership is also a test of African unity. The African Union has long advocated for a more unified approach to global issues, but divisions among member states have often hindered progress. Nigeria's bid could serve as a rallying point for the continent, demonstrating the power of collective action. If successful, it could pave the way for other African countries to play a greater role in global governance. At its core, Nigeria's push for G20 membership is about more than just economics or politics. It's about recognition of Africa's potential, its contributions, and its right to shape the global agenda. By seeking South Africa's help, Nigeria is not just asking for a favor, it's calling for a partnership that could redefine Africa's place in the world. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected, the need for inclusive global governance has never been greater. Nigeria's bid to join the G20 is a bold step toward achieving that goal. With South Africa's support, it could mark the beginning of a new era for Africa, one where the continent's voice is not just heard, but heeded. The question is, will the world listen? What do you think? Should Nigeria join the G20? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
It is significant that the G20 Leaders Summit later this year will be convened for the first time on African soil. This, in many ways, highlights the growing importance of the African continent in global economic, political, and environmental discussions that are ensuing around the world. Africa is home to some of the world's fastest growing economies and in many ways faces unique challenges such as the impact of climate change, developmental needs that it has, and the effects of global trade dynamics. This summit's location underscores the need for African voices to be heard on critical global issues like sustainable development, the digital economy, and the shift towards green energy. It is a great opportunity, too, to promote greater collaboration between African nations and the rest of the world.